Good morning, guys, and welcome out to Revolution. Hope you like my new little intro there. I was working on it last night, and I did the whole thing with Udio. So, Udio is the latest technology that's going to put millions of musicians out of a job. If you go to Udio, it's spelled Udio. It's just a Google app, I guess you'd call it, and you go there and you just type in I want a song that sounds like it's a happy song around the campfire, and you can even put your own lyrics there, but you can just go auto or instrumental, and it'll spit out a song like that in moments. In about a minute, you'll have a song like that. And so I just typed in certain things, and I kept adding to it and tweaking it, and until I got what I really wanted. And so and I put some little pretty pictures to it, and yeah, it's quite an amazing thing. And a friend of mine is a really good musician, and he went to someone's house the other day, and they're a muso as well, and they said, "I'll listen to some of the songs that I've been making," and he said they were so good that he was like, "Man, this is incredible." And he played him 4 songs. And then afterwards, he said, "Well, actually, these songs are done by Google in 1 minute." And they were just looking at each other saying, "Who's going to hire musicians to do like Netflix, Disney, Prime, Amazon, a lot of these groups, when they're doing their own movies now, they're no longer getting musicians. They're just using this type of technology." And why wouldn't you? If you go back and listen to that with your headphones on, you can see, like, it comes out as an MP3. It doesn't come out all layered and everything like that. But it's getting better and better every day. It's advancing, and so this is the future, where you can just turn around and make a full album. And so I'm planning on making some scripture songs that are quite catchy and that will help with Bible memorization and things like that. So anyway, that's a whole side issue, but I hope you enjoyed that little intro. I put a few pictures there just to get people interested. So we've got to tidy up the Korean King James Version onlyism and the story of Joseph Joe videos, because we did a part 1, and I showed you some of these pictures here that I nabbed from someone's Facebook. And so I'll just show you these. So basically there's 2 types of stream of King James versions at the moment in Korea. So there is this one, which sort of goes back to the D.A. Waite group, the Dean Bergman Society, I guess you call it. And it's from the Pure Cambridge edition of the King James, so it has that type of ring to it. If you're, a text critic, or you're a TR person, or King James preferred, or King James only, you sort of know what I'm talking about. And so this is Dr. Jung's Korean King James, and so this seems to be the one that has become the most popular, and a lot of people are saying this is the better one. But then there is a competing edition, which is this one here. Where have I got that? Okay, so we've got that one. I've got the other one here somewhere. Must be hiding. Is that it? No, that's the one I just showed you. I'm not sure why that picture wouldn't come up. Maybe it's behind Mark Ward here. Nope. I'll find it. Maybe I'll just get it up again. There we go. So this is the other one, and this seems to go back to a bit more of a Ruckmanite position, which is interesting. And then it sort of comes to having been translated from the Greek Textus Receptus. And so I'm pretty sure that we're talking about it being done from this big thing, the Interlinear Bible, which has the Textus Receptus in it. But if he's followed some of the definitions in there, they could be Jay Green's definitions, which that edition was done in 1976. He did bring out a better one, the Interlinear Greek English New Testament, and so I've actually used that with the translators to do Urdu. So that was it. That actual book was in Pakistan for quite a few years, and all the Strong's numbers. That's how we got all the Strong's numbers into the Textus Receptus site. They were putting in a lot of the numbers above the Greek words and the English words, so that was very helpful. And also the Spiros of Hiates edition, where he has all the Strong's numbers above the English words, that's still over there in Pakistan. But so we see, these two sort of competing Bibles, but it does look like this one was done first, the Ruckman one. It was done from the TR edition. It's done from the Cambridge 1762 edition and the Oxford King James Old Testament. And then this seems to have gone into Dr. Song Lee's Korean King James Version. Okay. So it says here, I translated the New Testament Greek Textus Receptus literally, comparing King James Version and adjusting the terms. And so they're the Bibles that he has there. And this one here is, as I mentioned, it has a DA weight type of influence. And these all seem quite popular. So that's what's happening. Of course, when you get people saying that they're part of a King James group, King James only group, I guess what actually happens is people say, hey, look, I prefer the Textus Receptus, or I prefer the King James Version. Let's go with that. And so what a lot of people don't realize is the King James Version is what I would consider the final Textus Receptus. And so this is, many people get confused with this, because what happened was you got the 5 editions of Erasmus, you've got the 4 editions of Stephanus, you've got the 5 editions of Theodore Beza, and a whole spattering of other Greek editions. But what the King James translators did, they primarily used the 1598 edition of Theodore Beza, which was his final edition. Now, he had other printings in between, but that was the final form of the text. And they only amended it in about 20 places. So it was a very small number of places where they amended it. Now, Scrivener said he counted 190 places where there was emendations. But when you go through these, the vast majority of these are not really translatable, like Beelzebub to Beelzebul, Nazareth to Nazareth. They're going to be translated the same in English anyway, regardless of what they say there. And so the vast majority of it is untranslatable. And so with those 20 differences, basically that's where you get Scrivener's Textus Receptus. He's brought out basically Beza's text 250 years after the fact. The King James translators didn't do a parallel Bible. Had they done that, there would be no separate Textus Receptus or King James only movements. They'd be one and the same. Now, the King James translators were very highly skilled, and they were skilled enough to formulate their own Greek text, which they did, but the vast majority of it is Beza. So you're looking at 20 little places around the New Testament that they tidied up. And these are mentioned in Beza's annotations anyway. It's not like it was going to be a surprise. And so that's why people, if you go to the Textus Receptus of Scrivener, or you go to Beza, or you go to the King James, you're pretty much going to get the same thing. Now, Beza's text will be lacking those 20 places. but they are in his annotations anyway. So most people just go, okay, let's just go to the underlying Greek text of the King James Version. Had they printed an edition of that, there would be no difference between the Textus Receptus guys and the King James guys. But they didn't. They were only commissioned to do an English version. So that's why some people just go to the King James, because it is basically the Textus Receptus. Now, I understand that it is preferable to do a translation from the Hebrew and from the Greek, but William Carey, he actually had some principles that people should just do starter editions, whether it's from a translation and it gets cleaned up later, which seems to be what's happened here. Apparently, there is a little bit of a concern with some of these guys knowing the original languages well enough to do translation work and things like that. But at the end of the day, if you have a foundation of the King James Bible and you're translating that into a language, that's a very good start. You're almost there. And then all you have to do is go through the original language sources and look up idioms, look up places, because understanding the Hebrew language, basically the Bible is a Hebrew document and some of it's in Greek. So it's written by Hebrews. And I even believe Luke was Hebrew as well, Jewish. And so anyway, I'll read through what appeared on my Textus Receptus Facebook. Okay. So I've just put it here because I've got quite a lot of private chat coming up on my Facebook. So I don't want it to, someone's little private chat just to be live in front of everyone. So it says Korean guys review about Ward's video of Korean KJV issues. I'm thankful that Brother Sayers remembered my posts and used them for the review of Mark Ward's video. I was worried a little bit because Pastor Joseph Joe is a third person in my aspect. So if he explains something wrong, I will have more burden to clarify the issues of Korean King James Version. So I sort of got the feeling about that where it didn't seem like Pastor Joseph Joe knew every detail, like he sort of knew broadly what was going on. And I understand that, like Mark Ward's not going to get someone who is Korean King James only, as he labels them. And so I guess too, what I'm realizing is a lot of Korean people are probably going to watch this as well. And I seem to be getting a lot of people watching this who are Korean, and it just coming up with the name in Korean, like Chinese style writing like this here. And so a lot of names are coming up on my Facebook and on private chat and things. And I'm like, well, these guys are all from Korea. And so no doubt that they would know these issues very well. Now, one thing I just want to say to you guys is you will get slandered. Mark Ward will call you King James only, okay? Rather than you prefer a certain text, the King James and the underlying text of the King James is the Textus Receptus, which we believe is akin or synonymous with the originals. We believe the Textus Receptus is the preserved text, the Hebrew Masoretic text is the preserved text, and the King James Version is a final form within two covers of both. And so the technology changed from manuscripts, handwritten manuscripts, and it just took about 100 years to iron out all the problems in the Hebrew text and in the English, in the Greek text and also in the English text, to get to the point where they had every word lined up properly and nothing missing, nothing added. It's just right there perfectly. And so we just like Scrivener did 250 years ago, he looked at the English and said, well, I can see almost all of it's Beza's text, but he just amended a few places here and there. That could be done with the Hebrew as well. And so a lot of people just say, well, we'll go with the Textus Receptus Greek, we'll go with the Masoretic Hebrew, but we're going to be guided by the King James Version translators' decisions. And so there's very, very few differences. But in those differences, we understand that the King James translators were superior scholars. They were very good scholars. And any one of those guys could have produced their own Greek or Hebrew text, just like Beza did, or Stephanus did, or Erasmus did. They could have done that. But they didn't. They were commissioned to do an English Bible. And so that's what they did. And so when people say, "Oh, it's a back translation" and all this sort of stuff, that's ridiculous. Just look at Theodore Beza's work, and it is you would be struggling to even find those 20 places where there's differences. But people have gone through with a fine-tooth comb and go, okay, there's like these 20 tiny little translational differences here. And so, like, say, for example, I'm just giving you one example of the 20 differences. So you've got Theodore Beza's text. I might even get it up for you, just so you know where these differences are. This is in the Pericope Adulterae story, actually. So if we go to John chapter 8 and verse 6, it very clearly points out, and this is in italics in the modern King James editions. So this is on my website, textusreceptus.com. So we see the King James here, the 1900 edition. It says, "And this they said, tempting him, that they might have to accuse him. But Jesus stooped down and with his finger wrote on the ground as though he heard them not." And so this is from two Greek words here. So what you see is this is the text of Theodore Beza, but I've put that in there because Scrivener rightly points out that this is in the King James, these words here. Now, the Complutensian Polyglot has those words, so there are Greek editions in the Reformation that have them. The King James translators felt that it should be in the text there. And so, yeah, I've got a little bit written here on my webpage about that. That this is translated as though he heard them not in the King James version. And this is one of the rare instances where the Greek of Beza in the main body of his text differs from the King James version reading. Okay. And so we can see in Hutter's polyglot, he has it there. So it's in the 1599 Greek that he had. So that's before the King James. We see many people pointing this out, Griesbach and others. If we go down to, I'm pretty sure I've got a picture of it. Oh yeah, it's in Stephanus's 1546 as well. There we go. It's in the Complutensian Polyglot. But when we get to the text of Theodore Beza, it's not there. Okay, so that's in the 1598 that the King James followed. So they obviously went with an earlier Stephanus reading. But the thing is too, you can see this. This is Beza's 1598 footnote. And so he has it written here, and he clearly talks all about it. So this is where one of those places, one of those 20 tiny little places where the King James translators have gone, look, we take our hat off to Theodore Beza. You've done a brilliant job, but we think that these two Greek words should be in there, and they've done their homework in that, and they've formulated their own Greek text to translate from, but they never printed it. And these two Greek readings are from the marginal notes of Beza. And so basically they have formed their own Greek text by adding those two words. It's a slight little change, but at the end of the day, we see in the King James, without any italic whatsoever, it has as though he heard them not. So they believe that that was a genuine reading that should be in there. And so I just sort of point that out as one of those 20 readings, because a lot of people don't understand the whole picture behind this. And so this is mentioned on the Korean guy's review about Ward's video of Korean King James Version issues. So I'll just keep reading here. After watching Ward's video throughout, I got several points which are somewhat touchy about. The Korean translations of the King James Bible transliterate the word unicorn exactly as it appears in the English King James Bible. This does not mean that Korean translators and pastors understand the word as horned horse. Pastor Jack Kim understands it as a one-horned rhinoceros. So there we go. It does. That was one of the things mentioned, and so it does seem like some people can think, well, in other languages they see this word as this or that. Well, we've got to be careful about just about saying those things without referencing that, because clearly here it does seem like people are seeing this as a one-horned rhinoceros. Dr. Young has a PhD in engineering and a Master of Arts degree from Pensacola Christian College, but he has no additional formal theological training. So as Pastor Joseph Joe pointed out, he is weak in Hebrew and Greek grammar. His weakness is exemplified in the translation of the Korean King James Version with words like science. I don't have much to add to this, but as an aside, I learned from reading Muller's A Study of Theology that science is synonymous with knowledge. And so I guess this is where there is that discussion in English Bibles, should it be science or should it be knowledge? But when you look up the definition of science, like I recently did in the Oxford English Dictionary, I think there was like 9 definitions, and that they all say that science just means knowledge, but it's specified knowledge. So you sort of have knowledge which could be broad, but scientific knowledge is just you're focusing on something, a bit like getting it under a magnifying glass and looking at it. So when you have knowledge that is grouped together like that, it's called a science. We even say that sometimes people who have some sort of skill, well, they've got that down to a science, don't they? Sort of thing. And so it just means they've gotten that type of knowledge and they've focused on it to the point where it is compiled knowledge. So it still is knowledge. But we can't get the modern definition of science today in English as in evolutionary science. Like some people go, well, that's evolution, or pseudoscience. So science so-called. So it's like a pseudoscience, a fake science. And some people put these type of definitions on there because there are so many different sciences out there that are fake. Like one that I would consider fake is the whole, psychiatric industry, mental illness. I think the whole thing is completely fake. I know I haven't looked into what MacArthur's said about it recently, but apparently he's being pulled over the coals for that. But the whole thing of someone diagnosing you with something and medicating you for the rest of your life, I think it's a pretty good scam. And usually out of 100 people, I'm the only one saying that. And there are so many people who don't like me saying that, but I think it's absolutely true. So I think that's a pseudoscience. So pretty much it covers everything that's kind of like a knowledge that has been grouped together so that they're focusing just on that one point or group of points rather than just broad knowledge is a science. And so I think people really, sometimes it's because people don't really understand English. And I'm not saying this with the Korean people, but I'm saying with people like Mark Ward, sometimes he's saying, well, this word's wrong, that word's wrong. But oftentimes he's not really understanding the English language itself. And people pointing out, these mistakes in the English Bible. And so James White would say that, the word turtle and turtle singing at night and all this sort of stuff. The King James translators got it wrong. Well, if you just get an older dictionary, a turtle was a name for turtle dove, which is a bird, So, of course, we don't get a turtle crawling on the ground and say, well, it's got the same name. There are archaic words and terminology in the King James Version. We understand that. The Trinitarian Bible Society, they have made lists of these words. D.A. Waite, with his Defined King James Version, he's made a lot of lists of these words. And you can find a lot of this on the internet, looking up etymology.com, just going to a Wiktionary, and I think it's very helpful for people to do that, to look up these terms. So it says here, unfortunately, the leading pastors who translated the King James Bible into Korean have such a superficial understanding of Reformed theology that they do not understand the sound theological framework of the Reformers directly or indirectly influence the translation of the Bible. So that's interesting. So I'm pretty sure the guy who wrote this is a Reformed guy, and so apparently the Presbyterian Church is quite a big church there. But yeah, having Reformed theology, so this would fit into the confessional bibliology guys. So it says here, as a result, it is not uncommon to find pastors and congregations who use the King James Bible leaning toward Ruckmanism. It is rare to find those who defend the TRKJV by embracing the sound system of confessional bibliology. So there we go. So yeah, I think even people who are not really Reformed, like even Stephen Anderson, who I would not recommend his ministry in a sense where I think he's just as toxic as someone like Peter Ruckman, but he's been converted to the confessional bibliology position, so it's a very interesting position. I usually sort of fall into that group as well, just by default, because I'm saying, okay, I agree with these type of things. And Edward Hills has some very interesting things that I agree with, and he would be considered sort of like confessional bibliology or ecclesiastical text, but that's more of a Theodore Leadus type of label. But yeah, and I can understand what he's saying here. He's basically saying, a lot of these guys don't really even understand like the Reformation theology. And so it's hard for them to really understand the confessions and things like that. And so that's his concern there. But he says, in any case, the Korean King James Version issue still has a lot to overcome. And Pastor Jack Kim, Woojin Lee, and I will be doing more detailed research. To be honest, I think if the Korean Independent Baptist churches are receptive to the academic research that Texas Receptors Academy and other KJV-related Facebook groups are talking about, it would have the right impact toward Korean Presbyterian churches. So I think this is a very interesting thing, because there are websites out there like the KJV Today.net. There are a lot of things there that explain some of these issues that would be brought up. I know the Trinitarian Bible Societies, they look at Bibles as well, and they check through that. They have a list of places which they make sure are in the Bible to start with, to make sure all the verses are there, all the words are there. And so but to me, this is great. It does. I don't go in genealogical fallacies. Okay, meaning I'm not like, well, this one comes from Ruckmanism, this one comes from, D.A. Waitcrowd. This one, like, I would say that I would be joining in with the D.A. Waitcrowd way before Ruckmanism. But say with the French Bible, there was a lady doing a King James Version French edition. And originally she was in contact with Gal Riplinger, but then later on she was in contact with some of the Dean Burgon guys. And but her work is very good. At least someone's doing something, like pushing toward a good translation. Ultimately, what would be great is to have a team of people, just like what the King James translators were, like people who know the language as well, who have good theology, a good reputation, and all the rest of it, and they were to come together and do it the way the King James translators did, with their cross-referencing system and all the rest of it. And that would be the perfect thing for every language to do that. I think the King James translators gave us a pattern there. But at the end of the day, until that day happens, which it mightn't happen, but we hope that it does, there's nothing wrong with going through these editions with a fine-tooth comb, comparing them, looking at the best readings. And so there's been many Textus Receptus English editions that have come out. We've seen, the J. Green ones, the modern King James that came out with J. Green, the new King James that came out with Farsted and Hodges and other people. Then we saw the KJV 2000 come out, and then we saw there's been so many, the AV7, so many. And what I've done over the years, I've looked at all these, comparing the King James, and that's why the King James Bible 2016 edition came out. And now the King James Version 2023 edition, because I'm constantly going through these, ironing out if there's any issues. People contact me all the time and say, well, I've read through, just pick a verse just randomly. I'm not saying this is an actual thing, but if they say they're, Romans chapter 2, verse 9, you've used this word, but we can see that word has changed in its definition. Have you thought about this other word or that word? And so these are things that I'm constantly dealing with and going through. And tidying up, because I believe this thing, if the revisers of the King James in 1881, who happen to be, Westcott and Horton, all these other guys, if they were actually good Orthodox people, we would have just had a refreshing update of just some old words, but we didn't see that. And so what's happened is there's huge skepticism about any type of update now. People are like, no, just leave it. So unfortunately, that's become one of the issues, is the readability. And so when I'm talking to people about the text, I'm talking to them about definitions or false definitions that have entered into the text, talking about verses that are missing or added to, and a lot of the time that can go over their head, and they're just like, well, it's old, I find it hard to read. And so that was one thing that I knew straight away. I was like, and even interviewing Kirk DeVitro yesterday, one of the first things he said, I understand it's hard to read at times. So I've been reading the King James for that long, it doesn't bother me anymore. I've read through the Bible, listening to audio along with it, speaking it out loud, studying it for so long that it's just internalized in me. And there are some words that I bring up and I know that they're older, but when I'm out street preaching, even here in Australia, I don't use the archaic terminology. When I'm out in countries like Papua New Guinea, where they mostly speak English, if you go to Indonesia and you're talking to Christians there, or Philippines, when I'm street preaching in the Philippines, I have to use an American accent. I go, the Bible says Jesus Christ is Lord. The Bible says, I preach an American accent, or else they don't understand me. And so we come back and we're talking with this American twang, which is quite interesting. But even in Pakistan, a lot of people do understand English there. In India, there's 50 million people there whose first language is English. So, but a lot of these people, when they get the King James, they're like, oh, it's a real learning curve for them. So that's the audience that I've done my Bible for, mostly, because when I was going to New Guinea, I've been there 13 times. A lot of the time street preaching, going to hospitals, jails. And so I'm meeting with people and they're saying, I want a Bible. And it's like, which one do we give them? We're giving them King James, but they're struggling with it. And so we would bring up New King James and I'm like, man, it's got issues in there. I would always just have this burden of like people going through the New King James and getting the wrong idea, or the proverb that says the opposite thing. And I'm like, and so I was like, well, I'm just going to do my own one that is readable to them, and which is akin to the King James. And so that's one of the reasons why I worked on the one that I did. And also because I've done translation work into the Khmer language, which is Cambodian, and into Urdu, the Pakistani language, talking with the translators. Oftentimes they're contacting me saying, well, is this what it means in the King James Bible? Because they'll do a word study, and oftentimes all of the word study material says it should read like the modern versions. But there's information there that clearly says the opposite, or says this word should mean something else. And it's like, where do you go with all that? And so just being able to translate that one verse and say, this is how it should read in modern English, then they're like, oh, okay, now I understand it. And they translate it that way. I was like, these guys really need a draft edition that's not complicated. And so that way they can go through and do these translations. And so, yeah, hopefully that helps you understand where I'm coming from as well. But I really appreciate this this information, and it looks like the Korean Textus Receptus King James guys are on their way to getting really good Bibles because there is a lot of concern about this. We saw this has happened with the Spanish Bible, with the Gomez edition. The Trinitarian Bible Society have brought out their own Spanish edition, and so then it just comes down to the locals really working these type of issues out. And so I would say if I was in Korea, if I was a Korean person and I had contact with these pastors and I had influence in these fields, yes, absolutely contacting people like D.A. Waite is very important, but he's just passed away last week. So there are other people who have done this work before, and I would contact the Trinitarian Bible Society, ask them for help and guidance. I would contact the King James Bible Research Council, Phil Stringer. I would contact him and get him involved. I would also contact myself because I've gone through the Urdu New Testament with the translator, the main principal translator, and we went through every verse. We've probably done half of the New Testament doing this, but I checked every marginal note in the New King James. I checked everywhere where this website, Scion of Zion, Scion of Zion King James Version comparison page. So this is mostly in the New Testament, where you can see, say Luke 91. I'll just go to a random verse here. The eye is single. So here it says, when your eye is healthy. Okay. So I would focus on that, and we would get the understanding what the Urdu means, and then and also what the English means, and then bring it out. And so this was a good check for my edition as well, going through all of these. And so there are some books that we haven't gone through this process of fine tuning, and so that's why we haven't printed yet the Urdu edition. But once we get around to doing that, which is very close. So when he's saying Luke 91, that means there's 91 places here. So the Trinitarian Bible Society also have a, what's it called? Textual key, TBS. I'll just type in Trinitarian Bible Society, textual key. So this is another one that would be good to go through. So again, if we go to Luke, you can download this as an article, but it has here like where there are things missing in modern Bibles, say, but by every word of God. So we know man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word of God. So that's omitted in a lot of Bibles. And so I would go through, this page, and then I would go through this page. Some of them are identical, but some of them aren't. And I would also go through the KJVtoday.net website and check out all the places that they mention, because oftentimes you'll see things translated in a certain way. Eagles or vultures, strain at a gnat or strain out a gnat. What's the difference? So this is very helpful as well. This guy's very, very well educated. He's fluent in several languages. I guess you would call him polyglot, meaning he knows. They say multilingual, and it becomes polyglot. I'm not sure. I guess it's if you know more than two languages. I know he's fluent in several languages. So Then we have brandplugged.com. So this is Will Kenny, and he has his King James Bible articles. And so a lot of very interesting things to say. I'll just jump on a random page. So we could go to Ecclesiastes, a comparative study, and it's very helpful. I have these pages open when I'm going through the Urdu edition that we're working on. And so he'll point out where they are in foreign language Bibles. Then he's talking about, some of the contradictions, what the Catholics say, what the Jehovah's Witnesses say, other editions, what John Gill has to say, which being confessional, you'd appreciate that type of thing. And so there's a lot of information on here, and so it's very helpful to go through that. It would probably be good to get people who are fluent in English and like to go through these. That's the thing why I'm going through. The person who is translating from into Urdu, he is fluent in English, but sometimes just going through this type of material, there's a difference between being fluent in English and fluent in the text criticism language, or knowing what King James only means to us, or just knowing straight away what the Geneva Bible is, or things like that, where they have to really learn a whole nother culture of Bibles to get to that level. And so I don't expect people to be on that level. But I'm just showing you a few pages I'll go to. I'd also go to my page, tr.org.au, and that's a very helpful page. And so oftentimes you can just go to the search. So say if we will go to Matthew 4. Actually, if I put that Matthew 4 in brackets, I think it is. No, it still goes there. Okay. But you can just go through, and sometimes I've written whole articles, like say Matthew 4:4. I've got Beza's there. I've got the 1900 King James. I've got the 2023 edition there. And I've got a commentary written there about the differences between Luke 4:4, where it's omitted, but by every word that proceeds out of the mouth of God. I think it omits that. And so sometimes I've put information in, sometimes I haven't. Here I've got Beza's 1598, a very old picture of that. And so that can help. But all I'm saying is that sometimes there's information, sometimes there's not. I've got a lot of the old English Bibles there, so you can compare them. But that was just a random thing to go to. So I would go there also, Trinitarian Bible Society. So all these things can be very helpful. And definitely there are dozens and dozens of people that I know in the Texas Receptors Academy who are very helpful. And perhaps it will be good to go through verse by verse through the Korean New Testament and just check things and ask questions about it. And so anyway, I just thought I'd throw that up there, that I do understand the need for TR King James versions to be done in other languages, and I think what you guys are doing is fantastic, or what these guys are doing, and I think it's good that you're making people aware of these editions. So we've got Docky in the house, just got his popcorn. And so Core Point says, most Korean IFB pastors do not know who Joseph Joe is. Though I'm still IFB and dispensational, I also hold to a confessional position. I think a lot of people have gravitated towards a confessional position. I'm not Calvinistic or Reformed, but I really appreciate a lot of what these guys have said. And when I go through someone like Peter Van Cleek's material, when I go through Jeff Riddle's material, I'm like, I like this. This is very solid. The bibliology there is very interesting. And I think a lot of IFB people are in agreement there. It's just that they are in disagreement against, Calvinism, Arminianism positions. And so I'll pull that down because we want to look at what Mark Ward has to say about this. So and I can only go for another hour and a half, basically, till about 10:30 my time. And so I want to try and get through this because, I've got a very busy day ahead of me. So let's continue with this video. So this is roughly about where we finished last time, and it was sort of just changing gears. And so let's get into this.
But I appear to be the one person who was, really listening at that time. I think that was before you even came. That was many years ago.
That's right.
That's right. So how in the world did you go on that path from Korean King James only to a King James only institution in America to that church?
Yeah, this is a long story, but I'm going to make it as short as possible. So like I said, my mom was introduced to King James onlyism by the pastor, Korean pastor, that was my pastor when I came to America. So I was in my high school. I think I was freshman, and then my mom moved to that church, knowing the King James Version, and then later, my whole family moved to that church. So I was taught, all these issues, and King James Version has to be the correct one, and then we have to use the Korean King James Version, and I wasn't living for God then, though. Although I was saved as a young boy. By hearing the gospel message clearly, I wasn't really living for God for a long time. Yet the Lord turned my life 180 degrees at the end of my military service in South Korea. And then even then, the same church, the same Korean King James only church. And the Lord shaped my life in a fresh way. And I felt called to preach. And the Korean pastor, he was a good, godly pastor, and I still love him. He was like my dad, and he really took great care of me as well. Even when I was coming to the United States, he's the one who recommended me a school that I need to go, and that was Hyles-Anderson College. And there, yes. So I because he knew an American missionary who was an American pastor in South Korea, who graduated from Hyles-Anderson, and then also I actually read Jack Scott in Korean. Some of his books were translated into Korean, and I loved it, and I loved him, and also even some books translated into Jack Scott, I think. Possibly, and I read some of his books, and I liked those experiences, and I decided to go to Hyles-Anderson College after I was called to preach. So in 2009, it was September 2009, I started attending Hyles-Anderson. But when I got there, what threw me off wasn't the King James onlyism. I love the King James onlyism there, yet I didn't really like the way I felt at that school, especially the way they treated the message of the gospel. Easy believism, some people call it, and I think David Cloud calls it quick prayerism. That was there. I was very concerned, but nobody seemed to be caring about it. So I decided to go back home. I thought there's nothing I can learn here. And then there was a friend of mine who's Korean at Crown at the time. So he asked me to come down and see Crown College and check it out. And so that, same year, 2009, it was the Christmas season. And I just traveled to Powell, Tennessee to see how that school was. And I liked it. I liked it there.
The spirit is different there, right?
Yeah, that's right. The spirits were different. So I decided to move to Crown College. That was spring 2010. And there I began to learn Greek first, and then later Hebrew. And I gradually realized that a perfect translation of the Bible is impossible. It's just no translation can possibly translate the Greek and Hebrew originals into the vernacular languages perfectly.
Okay, so it depends on how you define perfectly, because in the introduction to the King James Version, in the preface to the reader, it talks about the originals being perfect, But then in the dedication to King James, it says that they have one more exact edition. And so the word exact there means perfect. And so there are the originals which have a certain amount of perfection in them that no language could ever attain to, okay, because they are inspired by God. But a translation, the word trans means to, carry across. So we look at transport, it's getting the Greek and Hebrew over here, and you've got your receptor language over here. You're transporting it. You're translating it over from one to another. Now, we understand that there is preservation, and we believe that God has his words have been preserved, that you can access them all, where most of the modern text guys, they don't believe that we have access to all the words of God anyway. So even if you were to translate perfectly the Nestle Aland 28th edition, well, they're going to bring out a new one soon anyway, so it would have to be updated, where we believe that our text is settled, okay? Because when it moved from one technology, from manuscripts to printing, it just took about 100 years for those issues to get ironed out. But once it got to the King James text, all those issues were fixed. And so that's why we go back and look at that text and say, well, they nailed it. Where what you see with a lot of the majority text guys and a lot of the critical text guys, they're still looking forward to a time when their text will be good. Maybe with the CBGM, maybe using AI, maybe, all this sort of stuff. Find another manuscript in a cave somewhere that will help. But we believe that God's word has been preserved, and the Textus Receptus and Masoretic texts are akin to the originals. And so that's the first issue. But then it comes down to, okay, once you've got that settled text, can you translate it perfectly? And kai en ho logos, kai ho logos en pros ton theon, kai theos en ho logos. In the beginning was the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Now, in almost all English Bibles, it's the same, okay? So if I was to get someone to go through John 1 and say, okay, is there a mistranslation there? Now, if someone was fluent in English, because sometimes people know original languages, but they don't know English that well, and they say, oh, there's a mistake here, and it's actually their misunderstanding of English. You get a lot of foreigners saying that baptism is wrong, church is the wrong word, it means a cultic circle and all this sort of stuff. No, you just don't know the English language well. And so, but if you get someone fluent in the original languages and fluent in English, and you said, okay, so where in John 1:1 is there a mistake there? They'd say, well, there is no mistake there. Okay, so move to verse 2. Where is there a mistake there? Well, there's no mistake there. Verse 3. And if you just go through the Bible verse by verse, you get to places sometimes where there are idioms. Every language has them. It's raining cats and dogs sort of thing. Hebrew language idioms have crept into the New Testament text. The book of Matthew has them everywhere. So understanding the Hebrew language, the idioms in Hebrew, and how they've been brought across into the Greek helps to understand those languages. But once you know those idioms, and once you understand English idioms as well, we say, for ume, we say, God forbid. But an accurate translation of that today could also be, let it not be so. And so sometimes people like, it can only be, one way. It can only be translated ever as one way. But sometimes idioms fade away in English out of usage, and people don't really know why they're saying things a certain way. But understanding that it is an idiom, God forbid. Some people see this as a mistake in the King James. I think it's actually still used. People still use this. It's, oh, God forbid that anything bad would ever happen to them. Ume, or let it not be so that anything bad would happen to them. You're sort of saying the same thing. But I still think God forbid is still used. But where people are saying, oh no, it's dropped out and we need to, jump to another Bible. But at the end of the day, the question here, can anything be translated properly? And as I mentioned in my last video, my friends who have translated the EU documents into Luxembourgish, including the financial reports, including political parties, including rules on environmental pollution, including rules of war and engagement, how to deal with NATO, the US, going into Libya, what that was all about. Talking about all these things, these documents have been translated faithfully into Luxembourgish. So when I asked them, I said, so do you guys ever have any problem? First, I was asking them how they go through it. And they said, well, we're fluent in German, English, and Luxembourgish, so that helps with everything. Pretty much the documents are in English and they're done in German at the same time. So we look at both of them, and that gives us a very good starting point. And basically they said they throw it into Google Translate, and that was way back. I'm talking about like 15 years ago when I met this couple, and they said they throw it into Google Translate, and that gives them like a draft, that they can not like a finished thing. It's sort of like, okay, that's a rough idea, and there might be tons of mistakes. I'm sure it's way better now, but and that would help. And then they were able to translate it fluently. I said, so do you lose anything in translation? And they said, no, we're fluent in English and we're fluent in Luxembourgish, so it carries across perfectly. That we'd lose nothing. And so they're able to get all those technical things across to their country. They're able to work on these things, and there's no. They're saying that these guys are translators. They're saying there's no problem. If you buy some sort of gadget, it might be dangerous. You get a big fold-out sheet that's in Arabic, it's in Urdu, it's in Korean, it's in Chinese, it's in English, it's in Spanish, and it's all telling you, every single one of them is telling you this is a dangerous product. Be careful to use only this voltage. Don't open the back of it and look at the battery. All this sort of stuff. And if you were to go to court in any country, you could show them, hey, I did exactly what they said here, and the products still blew up on me and burnt my face, and so I'm suing the company. They would be liable. And so in the real world, not in translation world, fairyland, in the real world, you can translate things properly. Things can be brought across. Important things can be brought across. And so this is a common thing that people say, oh, you can never translate things properly. I believe you can. I think the King James translation is accurate. I think it is the English equivalent to the Masoretic text and the Textus Receptus. And, talk to translators who are doing this as an important job. And not just, we're translating, somewhere and it doesn't really matter if we do it using dynamic equivalency and all this. And no, talk to translators who do this for a job, and they're doing important work, and they will say you can translate things across, and you can get every concept across. Now, I'm not saying that if you just read the English language, you will get the exact point of, say a doctrine like hell, Hades being the place where people, when they die, they go straight to Hades. But eventually Hades will be thrown into Gehenna, which is the final destination of the damned. And that is basically the lake of fire. Hades, death and hell get thrown into Hades. That's a doctrine, but it's also in the grammar of the Greek language. Now, Hades and Gehenna, they're both translated as hell. So you don't see that in the grammar. But do you really need to see that? And is what's carried across and brought to us enough? Where we read about, they're in fire, they're in Gehenna, or they're in fire, they're in Hades. What's really missing there? Is there anything really missing? And so, some people point out New King James is like, oh, we want to translate hell as Hades, but and Gehenna is hell, this type of thing. But most people don't know what Hades is. It's a Greek term. And so, yes, there are tiny crumbs of information that knowing an original language, it does help, but you don't lose anything from that. We're talking about, splitting hairs on a Greek word. And oftentimes people who study Greek, they're completely wrong when it comes to words like love, agapeo, phileo. There's a few words for love, eros, but agapeo, I love, and phileo, most people translate that as I like rather than I love, or I love a pizza rather than I love God. But you see agape and agape is translated as love, like say agapeo, I love, and it's I love God, but it can also be I love the world. And phileo can be I love pizza sort of thing. In the Bible, it would have I love the brethren, or Philadelphia is said to be the church of brotherly kindness or brotherly love. But we do see at times it's translated as love God. And so oftentimes when they're saying, agape is the love of God and phileo is the love of objects or things or people, it's wrong. And so we can see that people who are claiming to be the gurus in the Greek language, many times that they don't really understand the Greek language themselves. And so oftentimes they'll have the letters under their name, or they've gone and studied, Greek and Hebrew for a few years. And then when they are put under pressure situations and we're like, okay, can you translate this word for us? They're like, and they can't. And so I understand there is a literary fluency where sometimes people can read documents, but they can't, they couldn't have a conversation with someone in Arabic, but they can read Arabic. And I understand that. But at the end of the day, there are a lot of fake, pretty much most Christians, they go, I'm going to get into the area of apologetics or Bible translation or whatever. And then they go, I better fake this Greek and Hebrew stuff because I don't want to look like an idiot. Because there are people out there like James White who make out that they're the Greek gurus. Most people who I talk to about 1 John 5:7, they're like, I'm a Greek guru. And then I point out Georgios Babiniotis, who is like the guru, the man. Probably James White would be like, 3% of his brain is sort of functioning in Greek, where Georgios Babiniotis is like, 95% or higher. He's like fluent in Greek, written 200 books on the language, 6 dictionaries. It's like, and he weighed in on 1 John 5:7 and said it needs to be there. The grammatical structure points out that there's a solecism in the text. It needs to be there. And he's got the credentials, you know what I mean? But people are like, who is this guy? The Anglo-Sanhedrin, the people who are who know English and they pretend to know Hebrew and Greek because they can look it up in they've got their interlinear and they can look up things. And so it does seem to be a bit of an epidemic where people are like, I'm fluent in this language. I know this. I know Greek and Hebrew. And so oftentimes when it comes to, people examining these pastors and saying, well, do they know Greek and Hebrew enough to do this Korean translation? Oftentimes they probably know just as much Greek as the English guys do. You know what I mean? And half the time, these Korean pastors, that they know English as well. That they, where if you go back to the United States and Australia and Canada and England, oftentimes these people are monolingual. They're not fluently speaking another language. You do get your exceptions. Some people might know a Spanish or German and things like that, which is great. But at the end of the day, being fluent in English it's a very difficult thing for people to learn. And English is a hard language for foreigners to learn. But anyway, I just thought I'd bring that up. And I've listened to a lot of I'll get this YouTube up so I won't mispronounce his name, because I often do, unless it's right in front of me. I've got so many subscriptions nowadays, it's hard to know exactly where to go to find things. Alexander Arguelles. I would recommend people go to this page here. Alexander has so much to say about languages, fluency in languages. He's a polyglot. At one stage, he had a website there where he had the percentages of how much he knew of about 60 languages. So some of them were university level fluency. Like he was in Korea teaching like Arabic and things like. He's brilliant. This guy is up there with, you know, Lancelot Andrews, knowing 21 languages and all that sort of stuff. He is brilliant. So I'd recommend people go through his material. He's, you know, one of the main leaders at the moment in polyliteracy. So you have polyliteracy, which is reading and understanding several languages, but you mightn't be conversant in it. So a lot of people can have polyliteracy with the Greek and with the Hebrew. It's not like they're going to go and order a sandwich somewhere in Jerusalem, but it does help to be polyliterate and to know the modern equivalents as well. And he talks a lot about that. And so if you want to know more about languages and stuff, like he's got, you know, German, Dutch, Afrikaans, Frisian, Icelandic. I don't even know half of these languages. And he's going through telling you how to, you know, learn Chinese. And so he lived in Korea for quite a while. So very interesting to listen to people who are outside of the Bible translation industrial complex, and to listen to them and what they've got to say about, because these guys are reading foreign language books all the time, the classics, not just pamphlets and things like that. These guys are reading the classic books in Chinese, in Korean, in Arabic, and they're commenting on these, saying, well, this is a good translation, it's a bad translation, or whatever. And so anyway, I better keep going with this video because we've only just touched a little bit on it, and I only have about an hour to go.
But still, I believed in this superiority of the text behind the King James Version. You know, people usually call it Masoretic and TR, and not knowing exactly how that works. And I just thought, yeah, I mean, that they have to be the superior one. So that's the way I was, you know, thinking in my mind without saying it aloud. And then 2012, so 2011, at the end of 2011, I got married in South Korea and came back with my wife, Lily, to the United States. And then I began to seriously study the issues behind the King James onlyism. And then I began to realize there are a lot that are not true. There are a lot that have.
So I've never met this pastor. I've got nothing against him, except he's saying that the King James has a lot of problems and all the rest of it. I put this challenge out to him. If he can send me the documentation to prove this, I'll go through it and make a video on all of his documentation. And I'll go through, you know, issue by issue. Apparently he wrote something to his college about the King James, pointing out errors. I'd love to go through that. I've gone through so many of these things, and most of these are very easily explained. A quick 2-minute Google search on some of these things clear everything up. So yeah, I put that challenge out there to him, not to demean him in any way, not to put him at odds with, you know, the King James only community, because I know there are some jerks out there who just, you know, I was actually reading through the guy who gave a lot of information and those pictures that I was showing earlier. I was going through some of the comments under one of those pictures just this morning, and there was a guy there who just said, why don't you just stick with the King James version? And it's like, he's talking about a Korean King James version. It's like, you know, just stick with the King James, like they've got to learn English. You know what I mean? It's like, no, every language should have their Bible from, you know, from the King James or from the Textus Receptus Hebrew Masoretic text. He's just like, stick with the King James. In other words, learn English, you know. And I don't know if they're just trolls, maybe atheists going around saying this sort of thing, because I would hate to think that people think that I'm saying that. You know, I absolutely advocate for everyone in every type of language, however it is. Like if you're learning, if you know Singlish, half Singaporean, half English, that's become a language. If you go to Papua New Guinea, half Papuan, half English. I mean, most people speak English, but then they speak Papuan, and so there are these languages there. I mean, we're willing to go and translate the Bible into 840 different dialects in Papua New Guinea. But sometimes you just go, you can bypass it all. A lot of them speak English and a lot of them speak Pidgin. So just focus on those two first and then move into the other languages. But, and we do have, in many of these languages, that's a Ukrainian, basically Ukrainian King James edition by the Trinitarian Bible Society. Now, I've heard there's 117 differences between the Russian Synodale Bible and the King James Version, but that is primarily a TR-based, Masoretic text-based Bible in Russian. And German Bible, and so that is basically like a Textus Receptus Masoretic text in German. What else have I got here? This one here for Papua New Guineans, the King James New Palette Testament. So this is an interlinear King James and Papua New Guinean Pidgin. And so I picked that up when I was in Papua New Guinea. So a lot of King James, a lot of Textus Receptus editions are out there. So anyway, let's continue with this.
Have been really I don't know. I have to be careful here again.
Right, I'm careful with that word as well. Untruths.
Yes,
They didn't realize they were stating untruths. But the reason we flirt with the word lie is that frequently when it comes to people like D.A. Waite, David Cloud, we feel they have a moral culpability. They ought to have known.
So he's saying, like D.A. Waite, David Cloud, and even at one side of his mouth, he's saying, oh, these are the more respectable guys. But then he called King James Version onlyism evil, okay, and lumps these guys in with that. And then he's saying these guys should have known better. But he doesn't go on, he doesn't say exactly where. Just, well, it's a King James onlyism sort of thing. They should know better, sort of thing. But I pretty much have adopted the D.A. Waite model. But so I would be doing that sin as well. So Mark, please tell me where I'm wrong exactly, because you can't just be vague and say, well, those kids over there, they're just sinners. And it's like you go and talk to them and they're not sleeping around, they're not cussing or, whatever you label as a sin. And it's like, so why are you condemning the guiltless here? What exactly is wrong? Please let me know where David Cloud's wrong, where D.A. Waite's wrong, or are you just slandering like you tend to do?
They had the opportunity to know that what they're saying isn't true.
But my feelings, though, I felt that I was lied to.
Right.
That's I felt that I was one of the victims. Coming all the way from South Korea to the United States.
So you're saying he felt like a victim. I understand if you get involved with some of these denominational church groups, even though they call themselves independent, or we're a fellowship, we're not a denomination. You can go into these and get spat out the other end, treated like rubbish, and everyone in there will love you 1 minute and then hate you the next. And it's like, well, join the club. That happens. That the people are toxic. A lot of the church world is just not even Christian, and so you'll meet a bunch of people like that. But what you've got to do is process things properly. When you've been through a group like that, do you throw out the Trinity and go, well, I'm not going to believe the Trinity then, or do you go, well, there's been questions with me, do I throw out the pre-trib rapture? Well, no, I restudied it, went back through it and went, no, this is very biblical. So the former group that I was in, they were pre-trib. Most people probably couldn't really biblically explain it to you, but I could. at the I was studying those things, and when I came out of it, I was like, well, I think it's truth. It's not just a denominational thing. It's not just a group thing. I went through tithing, and I was like, I can't justify to tithe anymore. I just don't see it. I don't see it in the New Testament. It says freely give as you want in your heart. It's up to you. And when you're giving, you're not giving to God, you're giving to man. When you're freely giving, not 10%, 5%, just whatever you will. If you're giving $100 into the plate, it's giving to men, and what you reap is what you'll sow. It's not, it doesn't gain you points with God. And where in the Old Testament, there was a whole thing of robbing God and all that. That's why most tithing sermons go back to Malachi. It goes back to the Old Testament because it's an old covenant thing. So, but I know a lot of people would disagree with me with that. But when I came out of a denomination, I had to work out what I'm going to keep and what I'm not. So this brother here has gone, well, I'm not going to keep the King James stance. But what I can see at times is people can go, I'm going to throw out everything that I was involved with. And the King James issue is one of those things that just sort of gets flushed as well. But he did do his homework on this. And so let's continue to listen.
To learn the Bible, the perfect Bible,
Right.
the King James Version. And then I realized that the first person who promoted the perfection of the King James Version was a Seventh Adventist.
Yeah.
Oh, the first person who promoted the perfection of the King James Bible was the Seventh-day Adventist. So that's talking about Wilkinson. And he's just believing this. To me, this is absolutely ridiculous. There are so many people who were saying, like, even if you read through the works of John Bunyan, he says when you read the English Authorized Version, it is exactly the original Greek and Hebrew into English. It's exact. It's perfect. And that's John Bunyan. It doesn't take much to just search around. I'm pretty sure even okay, I'm just going to quickly jump onto this website. There's a guy called Martin Shu, and he's written quite a lot about this type of thing because these type of accusations have been cleared up like 20 years ago by Dean Bergman Society. If you were to talk to any of them, they're like, yeah, I've done a series of videos on these. It's like, avdefensewebs.com. Okay, so that's gone down. I'll go to Wayback Machine. Whoops. Okay, I'll throw that one in there. And I'll just see if I can grab one of these pages. Okay, yes, it did come up. So AV Defense. So this would be another website that people should go to and go through the articles and read them and see if they're true or not. There's a lot of information here. So I'm just looking for anyway, there's so much here to go through. But websites like this, usually I've read a whole article on that. You know what I mean? People talking about the Seventh-day Adventist connection. I mean, all you have to do is just read David Cloud's material. He's talking about these things, and it's very clear what he's talking about when you go through. There's other people who aren't really part of any of these type of camps, but there's guys like Joey Faust, Faust, I think it is, and although there are some things that I'm in disagreement with him, oftentimes he's data mining the internet for sayings on the King James, and there are a lot of people claiming that the King James was akin to the originals, and so even Brian Ross, he's written a lot about this and spoken a lot about this, and so it's not like the Seventh-day Adventist thing is just it's one of the lamest arguments that you can have about the King James. And so I mean, let's look at what the King James translators themselves said. Okay, so preface 1611. King James preface, dedication to the King. Okay, I'm pretty sure this is it. Yeah, introduction to so you have the preface, the translators to the reader, but this is to the most high and mighty Prince James, by the grace of God, King of Great Britain, France, Ireland, and defender of the faith, the translators of the Bible, with grace, mercy, and peace through Jesus Christ our Lord. So this is from the translators. Okay, so let's look at what's written here. So it says, for when your highness, James, had once out of deep judgment apprehended how convenient it was that out of the original sacred tongues, so that's the Greek and Hebrew, together with the comparing of the labors both of our own English and of other foreign languages, of many worthy men who went before us, there should be one more exact translation of the Holy Scriptures into the English tongue. So what are they saying here? They're clearly saying that James, he understood how convenient it was, how appropriate it was, that out of the original sacred tongue, so out of the Greek and Hebrew. So when people say, oh, it's just an update of the bishops, no, they went to the original sacred tongues. Together with comparing of the labors, both of our own, yes, they did go to all the English translations, and they went to all the foreign language translations. That's a lot to go through, isn't it? The German, the Dutch, the French, the Spanish, the Italian. They went through everything and checked everything. Original languages, all the English languages, and all the foreign languages. And what did they produce? Of many, so it was of many worthy men. So it's not saying, oh, they're just men, they're just sinners, blah, blah, blah. No, they were worthy men. They knew what they were doing, who went before us, like Tyndale and Coverdale and Geneva Bible translators and bishops and etc. And in these foreign languages, lots of people, that there should be one more exact translation of the Holy Scriptures into English. So when it's saying exact, this is synonymous with saying a perfect translation. And so it's not of the perfection of the originals, but it's the perfection as perfect as a translation can be. So that was their goal. And so they're saying it's an exact translation, perfect translation. So is the Seventh-day Adventist the first one who said this, or did the King James Version translators say this themselves? But clearly they're saying their translation is exact. So the first guy to ever say this is a Seventh-day Adventist. And this is the thing. These guys oftentimes are saying, oh, the King James guys don't read the preface. But what about the other preface? Because oftentimes they're saying, oh, it says the meanest version in English is the Bible. So therefore the NIV is the Bible. It's like, no, they're talking about the editions that came before them. Tyndale, Coverdale, the Great Bible, the Bishop's Bible, Geneva Bible. These Bibles, not what's come recently. You can't be anachronistic with this. So anyway, I think you get the point. Let's just continue.
Yeah.
Yes, and then I began to.
But shouldn't Mark Ward correct him on that? Because Mark Ward knows better. He's pulling D.A. Waite and Cloud over the coals for apparently knowing better about something. But Mark Ward knows better about this Seventh-day Adventist thing. Surely he's heard many people say that. But
study all sorts of issues, and I think Lily, my wife, should still remember those days, I was stacking books like on my desk like this, just reading everything, everything I could read. And my graduation day was approaching at Crown, and then I had to write a graduation paper to graduate from Crown. And then I was thinking about going to Bob Jones for my master's. And then at the time, we had a professor who was very gracious, who was a real scholar. He wasn't necessarily King James only himself, but he was there to teach. I'm not going to reveal the name.
I think I know him, and I think I've talked to him, and I think I encouraged him not to teach there because he's validating King James onlyism by being there. But I validate the positive things you said about him.
Probably it was a different person, because I know there's another person. But,
okay.
But
I've known two guys like that.
Yeah. So he actually let me write a topic that I wanted to write, and I asked him if I can write on King James onlyism, and he said yes. And then one thing that he said to me that will never be forgotten, that is, he said, "Joe, do not fear the truth."
Wow, profound.
And yes, just pursue it. And I began to pursue it with all I had.
Well, the thing is, I mean, when I first became a Christian, it's like, well, the pursuit of truth is in everything. It's not like I go through life and then I'm like, well, I'm going to study about the Trinity and I'm not going to let the truth rattle me. Or it's like, I don't pick and choose what topic I'm going to have the truth about. I believe everything that I'm believing and promoting is the truth. And so I understand, it can be profound that someone would say that and then perhaps he went against this or whatever. But at the end of the day, I think that sometimes these type of things can be, people can say, well, I was a King James only guy, and then I all of a sudden wasn't afraid of the truth anymore, and I became a modern version advocate. And it's like, I'm not afraid of the truth. I'm reading stuff, going through stuff. I'm begging people to prove me wrong. I'll debate people. I'm looking for answers, and many people are in the Texas Receptors Academy. Many of the people who I've put up here, Martin Shu, Trinitarian Bible Society. These guys are like, they've got their stuff out there. People can critique exactly what they're saying. It's not like we're abandoning truth. We're looking for truth. We're studying these things. We're examining. Like, I'm going through Mark Ward's stuff. If James White was bringing out material like this regularly, I'd go through all his stuff as well. I don't care who's bringing it out. I'm going to look at it, critique it, and if my position is wrong, I'll go with it, because I don't just have a presupposition and I'm going to run with that. I have a desire for truth, and if what Mark Ward says is true, I'll run with it. But his position is just not convincing at all. It doesn't have one iota of compared to the position Texas Receptors, Masoretic text, King James position. He just has nothing to offer me except for a whole bunch of contradictory new modern Bibles that disagree with themselves. And to me, it's disingenuous, because he works for Logos, Faith Life, / Verbum, the Catholic branch of it. But he's basically just doing his job. Where I'm not doing my job. This is a passion of mine, and many other people, they're giving up time. They could be out playing, golf and going swimming and, getting a tan on the beach and, go holidaying and, with the money that they've saved, or working overtime and saving up and getting rich. But no, people are sacrificing to get the message out there that there are corruptions in these Bibles. And what people like Mark Ward, James White, Tim Berg, many of these other people are saying is untrue about the King James and the Texas Receptors.
Had all my strength and heart and my soul, and I think graduation paper should be about 15 page long or 20 page, but I ended up writing 134 pages. I have forgotten it actually for a long time, even until a few days ago, and you and I were talking. and I went back to that document in my computer.
I'll be glad to go through all those pages. I'll go through every single example that you brought out, and go through them, and we'll see if they are truth or if they have answers. Because what I find is, like, when I debated people like Stephen Boyce, I went through and wanted to understand what made him leave the King James TR position. And there was one verse that he said was a real sort of knockout for him. And it was in Acts chapter 7, where it says Moses was beautiful to God. And he was saying the word God doesn't appear in the Greek. And I'm pretty sure sometimes I get these things messed around if I don't have all the information in front of me. But anyway, it turns out it's a Hebrew idiom that's used quite regularly, and he's just not understanding the languages properly. It was so easily cleared up. I think it was KJVtoday.net, which I'll just quickly bring up. I'm pretty sure they dealt with it, and so this was the issue. If you just go down and go, okay, well, Book of Acts, well, here we are. Exceeding fair or beautiful in God's sight. And so the article is this big. It'd take you like 3 minutes to read it. And it just tidies everything up. And so, but this was the reason that, I'm sure it's not the only reason, but he was saying this was one of the main things where he was struggling and up at night and praying, and because of this. And it's answered. And it's just his misunderstanding of the Hebrew, of the Greek and English. It's clearly answered. And so sometimes people think that they have logical answers 10 years ago. When you actually bring all those answers up and have a good look at them, many times they've been answered. Many times they're just looking in the wrong place. And so they'll grab a D.A. Waite book that's written in 1992, and they'll go, oh, well, that's not a good answer. No one's got an answer, but there are people who have other answers. Or sometimes D.A. Waite, like he had a whole thing on Easter, and Jack Mormon wrote about Easter, and so did many others. And I contacted D.A. Waite and Jack Mormon, and both of them used my material on Easter. And so that was back in 2008 or something like that, and so they were willing to grow and to move on with their answers. And so anyway, let's just continue.
It's been sitting there over a decade now, and I haven't looked at it for a long time. And I realized that I wrote 134 pages on that topic, and I could feel the zeal that I had then. So, anyways, I was able to write it out, and that piece of work that I did as a person whose English is not really good, it was really with broken English. But I wrote it up and I sent it to some of my friends who are close to me. And that began to shatter all the relationships I had with the people in South Korea and with the people at Crown. And so I ended up, the paper, before that I presented the paper to the Crown, I already told my Korean pastor, that I was changing. And I couldn't lie to him. So I felt the moral obligation to tell him what I was going through. But that paper was a catalyst that to make the cause, my home church and the pastor and people, to excommunicate me officially. And I was begging my pastor, I wanted to really keep talking to him, although I did understand, right. It was a very hard issue for them. I totally understood. If they couldn't have me as their guest speaker, that's fine, but I still wanted to be friends. Right. Yet that was gone.
And to this day, that friendship is gone?
Gone. I have emailed some of the people at the church over time, but I haven't received any responses.
And can you, I don't want to break the narrative here. I really want to get this specific fact, though. What was it in what you wrote that they objected to? What was the specific doctrinal commitment you were making that they said, we reject that, you're out of here?
What made me the saddest was that there was no response whatsoever.
So you don't know exactly what they rejected you for? Not specifically. I mean, it's the King James. But
the whole thesis, the whole thesis in the King James Version. So I think the thesis of the paper was the scripture and church history refute the King James onlyism. That was my thesis. And if you, as a King James only person, if you look at that thesis, I don't think you want to read it further.
No.
And I think, yeah, that's what happened, I think. And then, they know, what other people say about the incorrect nature of King James onlyism. So they didn't really spend time in refuting what I was arguing. I was trying to,
Well, it sounds like they're not really interested in truth. Like, if I was the head of this organization that he was part of and he came to me with that article, I would go through it with him and show him where there's issues. And some people, it doesn't matter how much evidence you give. It's funny. Usually the place that I start with is 1 Timothy 3:16. And I start going through that because when they start arguing against the position that I have, that it should be theos instead of os, they oftentimes that they'll defend that tooth and nail. Then I'll show them James White is in agreement with me on that in his book. And it sort of does their head in, because oftentimes they're the guys who they're going to find this information, and they're fighting. It's like they have this automatic thing where they have to fight against you and anything you say. And so you're going through it, and you're showing them information. You're going through, majority of manuscript argumentation. You're going through, there's a solecism there, probably the worst solecism in the Nestle Aland Greek text. They overlook that. They say, no, still, it should be changed. You go through the whole hymn theory, how that was made up. And then I usually save the James White thing till last, because it's like, one of your own gurus says I'm right. And it's like, oftentimes I find that they're just adopting anything against the King James. And that's what I find the King James only controversy thing that James White wrote is. It's just a compilation of all arguments against the King James, all just sort of squished together, and like there it is in a book. But a lot of these have been answered. There are so many mistakes in James White's book. I often say, as much as I don't read Gail Riplinger's material, I don't recommend it and all the rest of it. I have looked at it, but I would say James White's material is way worse. He says, it's one of the worst pieces of literature ever written. James White, I've gone through his Revelation 16:5 material. It is very bad. There's so many mistakes just in that one section. And so when you go through his stuff, what he says about Erasmus, what he says, he basically rehashes a whole bunch of arguments. And so anyway, let's continue.
Try to convince people, hey, here's a fact here, here's a fact there. But it didn't really matter. And it was more emotional approach. It was driven by emotions. And one of the brothers who was talking to me and said, hey, Joe, you're so proud. You are one of the most proud people in the world, because you think you're better than Dr. Sexton. You're better than this teacher and that teacher. And you don't submit yourself to these teachings here. So you are so proud.
And I'm sure there could be stories about this, that people who have changed their eschatology, and they're saying, well, I'm no longer pre-trib, I'm amillennial, and they've written something and they've had exactly the same experience. I'm not siding with these people who did this to him. I'm not for them. I'm not against them. I'm not saying that how he was treated was fair or anything like that. But the thing is, he already has this, I'm thinking the King James is wrong. I would really like for him to send me that information, and I'll go through all that, and we'll see how wrong it is. Because sometimes people can just know just by doing a cursory look through a document and saying, well, this is just sort of a rehash of a James White argument or a Dan Wallace argument. And then they're trying to help him with that, or, we're only getting one side of the story here. I've got no reason to disbelieve him, but at the same time, yeah. And so he's had all the pain of, getting spat out by an organization, but that shouldn't equal, well, King James people are akin to this organization, or King James people will always treat people like that. What I find is some of these people who come out of these organizations, they can have a really bitter taste in their mouth, and rightfully so. I wouldn't fit in with half of these organizations. I would have been booted long ago. There are groups that I was involved with that they used to forbid you going away for 2 weeks on a holiday. It's ridiculous. I've gone away for like a year and lived in a foreign country, preaching, going to holding conventions, thousands of people turning up, going from church to church, going door to door. You know, they doing godly things, but they would be against that because of their stupid rules. And so I understand what it's like to be spat out and mocked, and people don't even know why they're mocking. They're sort of like, well, we got this rule and you don't follow it, so you're bad, you know. But does that mean I'm throwing out the true doctrines that they believe? No. But obviously, Joseph Joe has touched a nerve with the King James issue. So let's just continue. But I just thought I'd let you know that I'm not for him, against him. I would want to look at what he actually wrote rather than go with all the emotion of it all.
And you have bought the poison of scholarship, things like that. So it's more like ad hominem. Ad hominem? How do we call it? More like attack on the personal characters. Yes. So
just let you know that this guy speaks really well, really good English. I think he said he couldn't speak English when he went to America, and so that's he's doing really well.
That's what was going on. So it was heartbreaking, really. Literally, I couldn't sleep for a while, and my wife was weeping over a week over that.
Did she come from the same King James only circles in Korea?
Yes.
Okay.
That's right. But she saw me, researching and reading and seriously dabbling with it, and she was quickly, admitting that what she was taught was wrong. So there was no issue there whatsoever. She just submitted herself to me as her husband. So I was very grateful for that. But we just lost all the friends, the support, the financial support from South Korea. And because, I was actually rushing through my undergrad. I finished my 4-year degree in 2 years and 4 months.
And that's after coming as a non-English speaker. That is incredible.
That's right. So I took, many credit hours over the summer. And one semester I took like 24 credit hours with the special permit from the school. And because I wanted to go back to South Korea as soon as possible to help that church. That was the situation. And that was shattered. So it was really a big deal for us. Yet I quickly learned, though, through that process, that when you pursue the truth, things happen. And sometimes you will be abandoned by the people that you love. And I that was the moment that I was closest to the cross. And then I began to realize what our Lord Jesus would have felt when his disciples were abandoning him, when one of the disciples sold him and the other denied him. I'm not saying that I understood it fully, but I just understood a fraction of it.
Right.
And so at the end of the day, he's been involved in it with a group that focuses on having, the strict bibliology of, King James Bibles, and they're obviously exporting this to Korea. Now he's bucked against that and said, "I no longer have that position." He's got spat out the other end, and he's saying, I understand what Jesus was going through and all that sort of stuff. But at the end of the day, it is. I mean, what were you expecting? You know what I mean? It's like being part of the Ku Klux Klan or something and saying, "Hey, I'm marrying a black person." It's just, they're like, "Well, that's not part of our thing. You're out," sort of thing. You know what I mean? It's like if you went and joined the Pre-Tribulation Research Center and you were part of that group, and then you wrote a whole dissertation about how you're going to be a preterist. It's well, sorry, dude, you can't be part of the group anymore. I understand he's saying it's all in the goal of pursuing truth and everything like that. But so many people have left churches because they didn't want the Trinity anymore, and they're pursuing truth in modalism, Unitarianism. They no longer believe the eschatology anymore, so they're pursuing whatever eschatology they have, and so. All I'm saying is I can understand why he got booted out. It's an unpleasant thing to happen. If you're gonna play with the dogs, you're probably gonna get bitten. And so anyway, I'll just continue on.
I began to become humble before Christ, before the cross. That, Lord, I haven't truly understood what it means to bear the cross.
Right.
But now I feel it better. I know it little better.
That resonates with me so well, Joseph. I just have to break in and say.
So what I'm trying to get at here, and the reason why I keep bringing these things up, is sometimes two events can happen. Okay. Now, if he had written his thing about the King James issue, and everyone, wrote against that and corrected him on that, and he was like, "Oh, actually, no, yeah, I'm wrong on a lot of these things," because apparently they didn't even look at it, which, I would at least look at it and go through it. But imagine if that happened. He stayed in that institution and learned from it and was able to help others, in those situations. Perhaps that could have happened, but they didn't look at it. They spat him out the other end, and he's in two countries. He's in the United States and he's in Korea. So he's climbing up this ladder, and then he's realizing, hang on, I don't really want to be part of this. And so he's written this thing, and then they've tipped the ladder over. He's on the ground like, oh, I feel humbled. So sometimes what it is, it's actually two things happening at once. It's not just the King James issue. It's the whole denomination issue in groups that I wouldn't fit into, groups that I would have been spat out of years ago. And like even David Cloud, like I contacted David Cloud and said, on my Textus Receptus website, can I put your articles on there or links to your articles? And he said I was a heretic. And so I was like, cool, no worries, David, sweet. And most other people, Will Kinney, KJVtoday.net, lots of people who I've contacted said, yeah, if you're promoting a Textus Receptus, go for it. And so, and that heresy is basically, I'm a continuationist. So, I believe that when people jump online and say, oh, my wife's dying, can you pray for her? And I'm like, I believe that you can actually pray for her. Where they beg people to pray for their wife or for their family, whatever. And well, if God stopped that stuff, he stopped it. Why are you asking people to go against your cessationism? Most people aren't cessationists. They're cessationists when it comes to the theology, and they'll defend it. But then when their mother's dying, they beg people to pray for her, for healing and all this stuff. It's like, so I'm not a cessationist, but I've exposed all the fakes and Benny Hinning, Cref for $1 and all those for many, many years. But you still get thrown into that camp, and it's like, So anyway, but David Cloud said I was a heretic because of that. So I was like, okay, cool. But at the end of the day, there are groups out there who I would be spat out of too. And so sometimes what can happen, you've got an issue, King James issue. If you weren't part of this group, okay, the what I would consider, it could be a toxic group. Let me just say it is a toxic group, just for argument's sake. And you've got the King James issue, sometimes they can be blurred. So the experiences that you had weren't actually because you studied these issues out. They were actually because you were involved with a group that had toxicity in it, and they've thrown you out. Or perhaps you did things a little bit the wrong way. You really wanted to get out. Sometimes people can, I call it, sabotage, self-sabotage. Sometimes people do things because they understand that they're trapped inside a denomination and they really can't get out, and they need a good excuse to get out. And sometimes you don't even know that you're doing this, but subconsciously you've just sort of torn down a wall and you're walking through it and you're like, oh, I'm booted out. But you actually wanted to get out. You know what I mean? So some people do things, say things, become critical, and they're not even sure why, but then they're booted out and they're like, oh, now I'm free. Because it actually wasn't all those doctrines, but it was actually the toxic group or atmosphere that you're in. And you can have people with very, very good doctrine, but it's the people who are toxic. You can have a pastor believe everything that's right according to the Bible, but he's a jerk, and you don't want to be part of that. And so you sort of find your way out. That there's usually a door out, and so that could be it. I'm only just throwing these things out there, and I'm only just saying that sometimes when people are like, oh, well, I've rejected the King James for this reason and that reason, oftentimes it's coupled with, and I was involved with this other toxic group that they would spit anyone out who said that. And it's like, well, was it really the King James issue, Textus Receptus issue, or is it pretty much just this group? So anyway, let's continue.
I don't think about betrayals because that's not what's happened to me. I left King James Onlyism behind physically when I went to college. And though I still have those friends, none of them turned on me or were nasty to me. There's some distance, but I didn't break relationships that were precious to me. But I do get some of the same treatment that Jesus got, where he's mocked.
So notice it's become a victim club. Who hasn't been? I get people all the time just saying stuff to me, mocking and all sorts of things. And the thing is, what I find Mark Ward's doing, if you want to get hit by a car, go and play it out on the highway, sort of thing. So he's out on the highway, jumping in front of cars, bang, oh, been hit by a car. I'm a victim here. What are you expecting? You know what I mean? I've had people who are hyper King James only basically say all sorts of things. I've had critical text guys question my sexuality, say I'm a homo. I've had people say all sorts of things like you're gay, or I got kicked out of church for being found out that I was a masturbator, and all sorts of horrible things, and that's from just saying things on the internet, and people are like, no, we don't like what you said. And I've had Facebook pages opened up about me, YouTube channels dedicated called I Hate Nick Sayers, when they've got old pictures of me and they're moving my lips and I'm saying, I love to be gay and all this sort of stuff. And it's like, so join the club, Mark. If you're going to go and fight battles, you're going to get injured. But you don't find me just being a victim about all this. You've gone to play on the freeway, you got hit. If you want to be involved with these type of argumentation, or in these circles of Bible translation, talking about people getting spat out of denominations and things like that, people are going to get their feathers ruffled. So you're just going to have to harden up with all that and stop with all the victimhood. I was a victim and all that. Who isn't? You know what I mean? Yes, it's hard. Yes, you go through these things, but you just got to process it properly and not carry the TR King James thing along with it and go, I'm a victim because of these people. Because what I'm constantly seeing come out of Mark Ward's mouth is, these people are treating me bad online. And, well, he's being passive-aggressive towards people. I feel like he's being passive-aggressive towards me and my position. And so I'm like, hey, how dare you say this? And how dare you say that people are uneducated? And how dare you put yourself on this ivory tower and highbrow position where you're looking down at people and saying that no one in the King James version advocacy, TR advocacy positions are educated or know the languages properly and all this sort of stuff. Oftentimes, Mark Ward is saying that we know nothing. He just said that D.A. Waite and David Cloud know better. And they're liars. And it's like, where do you get off on that? People are going to, like, I don't have to support D.A. Waite. I'm not part of the Dean Burgon Society. I'm interviewing these guys because they're very interesting and that they've got good things to say. But at the end of the day, I'm not part of their denomination or their group or anything. So I haven't got a barrow to push. If they were bad, I'd just say, well, they're bad in this area, but they're good in this area, whatever. But I get annoyed at you just outright calling them liars. You know what I mean? Like, where are they lying? Be specific. Don't just be vague. Oh, well, these people, the King James guys are just liars. And it's like, come on, man. Anyway, let's continue.
And when they say, oh, you're the Son of God, come down from the cross. He is the Son of God. He could come down from the cross. The whole reason he's not coming down from the cross is to provide a way of salvation for the very kind of people who are making that taunt. That's what resonates with me, because I am not Christ. You're not Christ. We're not sinless. But in this area, I believe, I'm not sinning to say what's true. And I do receive incredibly vile treatment from some King James onlyists on a regular basis. It's hard for me to know where they are on the spectrum. I can tend to think that they must be the more extreme cultish variety. I don't know.
Notice the more extreme cultish variety. So if I said, oh, well, Mark Ward is of the more extreme cultish variety of modern versionism, it's basically saying everyone's in a cult in that group, but there are more extreme people who are just toxic jerks in that group. And it's like, he's like, oh, people are more charitable, that I like talking to them, but they're still in a cult and they're still like D.A. Wade, still dangerous, still part of an evil group and all this sort of stuff. Mark Ward is just being passive aggressive here, isn't he? And he's playing the victim. I could play that victim card too, Mark. How many critical text people have said diabolical things about me? How many things did James White say about me on his show? Saying all sorts of crazy things about me, and even to the point where my unsaved family was saying, who does this guy think he is? He's just making up stuff about you, because they know me personally. They know that what he was saying was untrue. I'm like, well, this is the state of modern day American apologetics, guys, unfortunately. And I put myself right out there so he would do that. I made myself a bit of a lightning rod there. So I would experience all that. And I went, wow, look at how far this guy's going. So I kept pointing it out and saying, hey, James, are you sure that I'm like this? Are you sure that what I'm teaching is toxic? Are you sure that you warning people to stay away from my teaching? Are you warning people that the Urdu people shouldn't have a Textus Receptus Bible? Is all this, legitimate? Is all this legitimate evaluation of me and the work that I'm doing, or are you just making stuff up because I pointed out some things in your own ministry that really need to be looked at? And so, yes, Titus says he's passive aggressive with the victim mentality, and we see this today. This is a very common tactic with the left. They're taking the moral high ground. We're just trying to show people truth, and they don't want to hear it. And these people, they're a little bit lower than us. They're not as smart as us. They're sort of dummies, but we still love them. We care for them. There are these extreme ones though who are in the cult, and that they're jerks. But all this sort of stuff is passive aggressive, gaslighting, and we can see straight through Mark Ward. When you slow these videos down and look at exactly what he's saying, that's what he's doing. So I've got to finish this video in 10 minutes, so I'm going to try and hurry up.
I think of Jesus,
which I just looked, and I've got 15 minutes of video to do. So obviously, I'll go for 10 more minutes. I'll stop it, and I'll do a part 3.
The time. This has brought me closer to Jesus as well. And anybody can say this, even if, people who go into real doctrinal error may talk about their persecution, the persecution they receive. Just because you get persecuted doesn't mean you're right.
Amen. That's exactly what I'm bringing up.
That's right.
So that just made me humble and made me say, Lord, I just want to be right. Make me right. Make it so that this suffering is not in vain. Do some good with it. I broke up your story because I just had to say a big amen to that portion. Yeah,
no problem. So if you ask me then, hey, Joe, are you sad or do you regret that you spilled the beans to the people that you love and who would let you go like that? And I would say, no, I will do that again. Because that experience is the greatest lesson I've ever learned as a Christian. The feeling of the pain and suffering, that grew me the most as a Christian. If I didn't have that experience, I wouldn't have become a pastor like me today.
And so, in all honesty, 90% of the pain and everything is because he left a group that he liked. Really, isn't it?
Through that experience, I was a very proud young man. Although I'm still proud, I was extremely proud young man. And then that humbled me more than anything in my whole life. And I began to understand what it feels to feel hurt. When people say, I hurt, it hurts. I understood it really hurts. It really hurts. So as a pastor now, I don't look down on any person who says who says I'm hurt, because I do remember those pains in my heart, in my wife's heart. And so I'm very thankful for those experiences. So I cherish those moments, and I had to get closer to the Lord through that. And what I'm thankful for about that incident is also that I wasn't bitter at all. very quickly, as I was dealing with it through the cross, I was trying to understand it through the lens of the cross. Then the Lord taught me that, Joe, you have no right to be angry or bitter or bring curse upon these people. Rather, you need to pray. You need to
Bless
pray
those who curse
for
you.
them.
Pray and curse not.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, there were rumors going around in South Korea about me that I never thought of. I actually got to know about them about a year after that happened. I was already at Bob Jones, and then a friend of mine at Crown, who is Korean, he told me what was going on in South Korea about me. And it was actually very harsh rumors. But I was just, when I heard that, Lily and I heard that, and we were just laughing. We weren't even angry. We were just laughing. How could they be so imaginative about my intentions behind my actions and words? So we had more reasons to pray for them because God.
And so obviously the vast majority of him being a victim and all this sort of stuff is probably legitimate for leaving an organization, not for swapping the King James only position. And so some people, they can swap from, Textus Receptus, advocacy to majority text to critical text. Like you look at Matthew Everhard, he's just sort of going through and picking it out, whatever he wants to be, without really ramifications of being kicked out or what. Some people are like, "Oh, I'm a TR person," and they get kicked out. Some people, they do this with young Earth creationism. They're a scientist, and they're like, "Well, I actually believe in the biblical account of young Earth creationism." They get kicked out of their institution. You look at, I was interviewing Kirk DeVitro just yesterday, and he was saying that he had applied to be part of an organization, but because they found out he was advocating for the King James and he had a TR stance, they refused him entry into that school. And so there is persecution against King James people. I mean, how many people, like, say, I look at someone like Robert Truelove. Okay, now James White was just like Robert Truelove and showing pictures of Stephen Anderson and showing pictures of Ruckman and Ripplinger and saying all this stuff for 20 minutes and then saying Robert Truelove, blah, blah, blah. How many people would have gone, okay, let's join Robert Truelove's church? And then someone's gone, oh, do you realize he's a King James only guy? Oh, okay, let's not go there. How many people have been turned away? How much persecution have these guys copped just for having a stance on their Bible from critical text people? You know what I mean? It's quite amazing. So anyway, let's continue to listen.
Knows the truth, and so that was the way I was coming out of the King James onlyism, and of course at Bob Jones, the Lord gave me new friends. Like Mount Calvary Baptist Church was a great resource for me to learn about preaching and the new versions, and a lot of good professors there.
So notice he said the new versions. So it's like, I guess he's advocating for all NIV, ESV, NASB, with all the contradictions that they have just with each other and all the deletions and all that sort of stuff. So it's not just I've left King James onlyism. He's now like, I accept these other versions. So it's quite a big leap to go from one to the other. It's a big thing to do.
Who taught me Greek and Hebrew, and I enjoyed those moments there, and that's how I got out of the King James version, and behind that, actually, the scholars.
Okay, so Titus, he just said, Ward is softening down others around him, sneaky, and then he said, Bob Jones or Crown College have doctrinal statements to sign before entry. Dude picked the wrong fight, and I think that as well. Like if I was to join the CIA, and all of a sudden I want to do an expose on how the CIA have ruined the economy of Venezuela or something like that, well, I'm going to get kicked out. You know what I mean? It's like, and then it's like, oh, I really enjoyed it there and I had good friends, but I'm standing for the truth over everything. What were you expecting? And I understand he's saying, okay, I've got the truth over everything, but I would love to see what he actually wrote. And I would love for this guy to, Joseph Joe, to send me his article. I'll go through it and we'll see if it's true or not. All the emotions aside of this being kicked out of the denomination and everything, let's go, okay, well, let's just look at the facts here. We'll just see if this is true. If not, then he has actually gone out of an institution for no real logical reason. But let's just continue.
Leadership was also another factor that got me out of that camp. The pursuit of truth. You don't fear the truth, you just face it. And if there are holes in your argument, you need to constantly fix yourself. It's not that you have to fix the truth, but you just need to fix your thought process. And that helps you to grow as a person and as a preacher. So the value of scholarship was there throughout my journey from King James onlyism into the conservative evangelicalism. And I know a lot of young kids who are from Crown, especially, who are very bitter, and their ministries are surrounded by that feelings and emotions, and they just ridicule Crown and Dr. Sexton, and they put out videos, ridiculing the rule books of that school and things like that. I see that, and I know that's not right either. And I haven't.
Well, but maybe it is right, but
I had been purposefully silent about it. I could have talked about it more than I have, but I have been very quiet about this issue until now. And I even asked Lily, is it time to talk about this? And she and I prayed, and then she said, yeah, let's go. And I even asked Pastor Matt about it, and Pastor Matt Walker said, yeah, why don't you do that, Joe? It's going to be a great opportunity for you to share. So I decided to do it. Yeah. So we'll see. Yes, we'll see when I will be able to deal with it in a full blown way. Right. But I'm looking forward to those days.
Well, I can encourage you, Joe, that if you feel some of the same call I do, you feel it for the Korean church, I feel it for the English speaking church. That if you are gracious, firm but gracious, like I don't pretend that I'm not opposing something serious. It's not all nice. I say some ideas are wrong.
Okay, so I'm trying to fast forward this, but I actually don't want to just go over this without giving it its. Going through every word, or else what's the point in doing these videos? So I'll make a part 3 later on because I've got about 2 minutes to go. But let's just continue with Mark, because he's sort of giving all his reasons, saying he's being gracious and all this sort of stuff, where no, Mark is being passive aggressive. He's gaslighting. He's very toxic when it comes to him being in the ivory tower. He's a highbrow, well-educated man, and he's trying to reach these poor, illiterate King James people who don't even know how to read their own Bible and all this sort of stuff. And I'll debate Mark Ward publicly. If he wants to debate these issues, I can bring these out. Perhaps it would be an interesting thing to go through all of his videos and show where he's being toxic, passive-aggressive, gaslighting, ad hominem argumentation, where he's putting himself above others, where he's making accusations. And so what he does too is he says, I've finally found a King James only person who is reasonable and who will listen to my side of the story. And I'm like, well, there are dozens of people out there who write articles and they listen to what Mark Ward's saying and they go through and say, well, he said this, but it's wrong. He said this, well, that might be right. And people are listening. But what he's doing is he's basically the other side of what he's just said is every King James only person doesn't listen. They're stubborn, they're prideful, they won't listen to my arguments. And I found one who's sort of in agreement with me. Isn't it? He's basically saying it's rare, to have someone reasonable in this group. So it's a full accusation. So it's being passive aggressive. He just speaks about the opposite. So, it's like me saying, well, finally, I've found someone in the critical text camp who will listen to me and actually listen to what I've got to say. That's basically saying everyone in that camp doesn't listen. They're not reasonable and you can't talk with them. And so this is what Mark Ward does in every single video. And once you see this, you can't unsee it. It just keeps coming out. It's like, okay, I wonder what he's going to say next. Will it be, throwing good people under the bus and saying, well, they're a part of a cult? Will it be labeling everyone Ruckmanites? Will it be labeling everyone King James onlyists when he actually apologized for saying that? I don't know why, because he keeps doing it. And he wonders why we turn around and say, hey, Mark. And he's like, I'm very charitable. It's like, well, let another man praise you, not your own lips, And what I've found is you're not really that charitable. So anyway, I've gone a minute over than what I said. So what I'll do, I'll stop it right there. And we'll go back maybe in the third video. I'll go back a few minutes because it has been a little bit rushed. Titus says, yes, getting down to the actual case gets on Mark's nerves. LOL. Yes, it does. So what I'll do, I want to play my fancy little thing again. And so I'll play this, and I've got to get ready to head on out. So God bless you guys. Thanks for joining us, and we'll continue with part 3 maybe later on today, because it might be a quick one, but maybe not. And so God bless you guys, and have a great evening, day, or whatever you're doing.